Did you always want to be in film? I like to hear about people's early wants and goals and dreams and, where they see
Yeah,
themselves.
I think I've always been a huge fan of movies, and even from when I was a teenager, going to the movies constantly. Going with my father to the movies, and he'd sit up in the balcony and smoke a big cigar.
In the
Back
in
in
the theater.
Oh yeah, yeah. And he'd be listening. He'd be listening to a
Ball
transistor
game
radio.
or something.
The Jet game was on, and he'd be like cursing in the middle of the movie, with whatever.
What?
But this, I think he probably wagered a little bit on the game, and but anyway, that started pretty early for me, and I also like to write when I was in high school, and I think I wanted to write screenplays, and I went to film school, and I was actually turned on in film school to an editor who taught for a couple of years, this guy Aram Avakian, and he became like a mentor, and through him I got into editing after college, and then I was kind of lucky when I started working. I had a couple of jobs for Sidney Lumet, for Herb Gardner, the playwright. There was a film, Desperately Seeking Susan, that people seem to remember back
Yes.
from the day.
Yeah.
And those were like my first 5 years out of
School.
college.
Wow.
And then I realized like what a big name Aram Avakian was in the editing community. And yeah, I met a bunch of people that he had worked with in the business, and anyway, so I spent about 20 years working on feature films that were shot in New York. It was Donnie Brasco I worked on, and The Juror, and I was kind of getting a little tired of working on the studio films, even though it provided a really good living.
Yeah.
It gets to be a little. When I was working on Changing Lanes, for instance, there was like a 6 month period where they just kept reshooting the ending and
Wow.
testing it in previews in
Yeah.
California.
Yeah.
And there must have been 20 endings to that movie, from the original script through all the rewrites and changes. And I think
Because of these
finally,
previews. Right.
they kept previewing the change, the new ending, and it was like, oh my God, this movie, it just doesn't end right.
Yeah.
They all felt that whatever ending they had at the time just wasn't sufficient, and it just became like a random. And finally, after like 20 endings, they just invested a couple of $1 million to bring in a high-priced screenwriter. I think it was Robert Town who did the screenplay for Chinatown, and
Oh,
they
wow.
just paid him to rewrite the ending. All right, now you take a stab at it. And he rewrote an ending, and actually it was the best of all the 20 previous endings. But just the process of dealing with studios on these films,
Yeah.
I did have an opportunity to work with some great people, and under some really terrific circumstances. But
Were
the
you
politics,
craving a little more autonomy, creative input? What do you
yeah,
think? Yeah.
all of that, and that's what Screen Door Jesus offered me. When that came along, it was kind of like perfect timing. It was like
Yeah.
right after Changing Lanes, and it was like, okay, well, let's move into producing. Let's sit at the bigger table. I'm going to edit Screen Door Jesus also. It seems to be a really great group of people that we've gotten together to make this film. We had an incredibly talented director of photography, this guy Dan Stoloff, and an amazing production designer. And yeah, just the whole effort behind making that film, and the cast was extraordinary. And 99% of them were from Texas. We had a really good casting director on the film,
Also
and we had
important.
63 speaking parts
Wow.
to cast. We made it with a low budget diversity agreement with SAG, so it was a union film. And there are some people that I'm really thankful to have, really good relationships with to this day. People that were in the cast.
Well,
Uh,
we often, when we look at the credits, at least as a moviegoer and a layperson, I guess I'd have to say, we look at, the cast and the other things scroll by. But, um, when my kids were small and I'd read a little children's book, I always read who illustrated it. And my daughter is an illustrator to this day. I don't claim I influenced that at all. She was demonstrating incredible talent at age two. However, I think what you've raised for me, citing all these names, is the importance of appreciating just who are the others who often don't get the credit, but they will be listed. And I sometimes I feel as though I recognized a few of the names that you said, not the bulk of them, but it kind of brings to light when I first met you or was first going to Artists Without Walls, and my viewers are probably getting a sense now. What is this Artists Without Walls in New York? Because Vinny now Heimer's been on the show, and John Moran, and you and but the thing about it is Charles Hale and Neve Highland, who created that. When I was first talking with Charles and trying to decide, should I drive to New York? It's a Tuesday night. It's a few hours, and I was so glad I made the commitment a few times. But one thing that struck me, and he did say this in association with your name as well, was you can't believe the talent in the people who are members of Artists Without Walls. It's mind blowing, and they're humble, and it set a tone. Of course, well, you're shaking your head, but I want to give you the compliment. I think my viewers are probably picking up on a trend at this point. Like, wow, this is someone who has mastery in the field, who really has not just paid his dues, but the getting really, really good at something doesn't just happen. And I'm using that as an apology for the podcast sometimes too. You've been such a support. Keep going, Ben.
well, that's the thing that attracted me to Artists Without Walls was, that it is a supportive community, and we say that a lot, but it's very rare that exists in this business. I mean, it's a very competitive business.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, People often don't want to share information or advice. Part of the reason that I stayed in New York as opposed to moving to Los Angeles, where there are obviously more films and bigger films being made,
Yeah.
was because that community out in Los Angeles was like really distasteful.
Isn't that sad?
Where in New York, the film community, like everybody knows each other, and if somebody calls you for a job and you're busy, they'll often say, "Well, can you recommend somebody else?" My experiences here in the city have always been like, yeah, it's like three or four names,
Yeah.
but I found when I was in Los Angeles and I called somebody and to see if they needed a work or something and they were busy, I would say, do you have any other names or suggestions? No, no, no.
Interesting. What a
It was
difference.
like, no, and it's a much larger community. I mean, it was much more spread out than the New York community at the time.
Yeah.
But I got a sense of that West Coast thing. I spent a little bit of time when I was younger out in California, and I just got that vibe everywhere. Whether it was socially or I wound up working for a summer at a roller coaster up at Magic Mountain.
Did
Um,
you really?
Yeah, I went out there looking for a film job when I was like 19, and it was during the summer, and there were no film. It wasn't the season to
Oh,
shoot.
okay.
So instead of coming home, I answered an ad up in Valencia. There's an amusement park called Magic Mountain,
Oh,
and
I thought it might be
I,
Disney or something, but it's not
no,
that.
no, that was the competition. That was the
Oh,
competition.
okay.
And so I drove up, and it was just a very weird experience. The way it was like Disney was the enemy. Like you couldn't tell anybody if you knew anybody from Disney, you couldn't talk to them
Really?
because you worked for Six Flags. So you could. It was like they didn't make me sign like a
No,
non-disclosure
I
agreement,
was gonna say, yeah.
but the
No
competition
compete.
was definitely, and I remember them not being too. Sometimes I was working on the roller coaster, and when you work on the roller coaster, you do shifts, and the best shift is when you're working on the microphone and you got the controls.
I bet.
And and sometimes I would tell people that they were really lucky because the Matterhorn we heard was closed at Disneyland today.
Oh,
You know,
so
they
you
were
brought your
they,
marketing wisdom with you too.
they made the right choice. But they'd come up and they'd reprimand me for saying, "Oh, man, if they ever hear you saying that, it's like
But
war."
you probably have no idea by the fact that I'm smiling because there's a part of me getting triggered from just even the word roller coaster. Years ago, I went with friends. It was a very big mistake, but in high school, you make a lot of those. There was a place on Nantasket Beach in Massachusetts where, oh my gosh, I forgot the name of the park, but anyway, they all wanted to go on the roller coaster, and I was like, you know what? I'm really not a. Oh, come on, you got to go. Like, I'm really not a. I don't do well on them. Oh, come on, we'll all sit together. You've probably seen a lot of people talking other people into this. The short piece was the look on the roller coaster operator's face. It was a grin I will never forget because and the eye contact. I think he knew I was one of those, and he just had this look. And I the first three clicks, I said, "Can you please stop it?" And he just got an even bigger grin, like, "Oh no, hon, you are on this ride for like, I will see you with your hair plastered back, at the end of this or something." But it's not a great segue for yeah. One question I was going to ask was how your parents felt about you choosing to go to film school, as it related to any other more academic, whatever choice. But if your dad's the guy taking you to the movies and smoking a cigar in the balcony, I'm thinking maybe he was okay with your decision.
They were my parents were very supportive of what I wanted to do. They disagree. They probably in their hearts disagreed with it. My father was very pragmatic, and
Yeah,
definitely there was a big business thing,
keep it
going
as a
on.
hobby.
Keeping it as a hobby, and there was a relative, an older relative that I had who was a composer in the 1940s,
Wow.
and he didn't really pursue his songwriting career. And my father would always point to, yeah, remember his Uncle Ben, he got some sense. He went into the paint business, and he made a living. And I later found out that there was a much more complicated story to this.
It always
And
is,
um,
especially with
and I
family.
and and I didn't find out about it until I was introducing when I had gotten married, and I was introducing my wife to my relatives at a Christmas party, and I was explaining how some people were related,
Hmm.
as I thought, and one of my aunts corrected me and said, "Oh, no, no, that's not who Bernie was." And all of a sudden, and well, what's the story? And I remember she took me into the kitchen, and she's holding my hand, and she's
Oh, wow.
tearfully telling me the story about, my uncle's mother who passed away in the 1930s when he was an infant, And what
Oh,
happened in so many cases back in those days, like the younger sister stepped up,
right.
married the husband, took care of the kids, and then in this particular case, the younger sister had a couple of more kids with
I
the new
was
husband.
shaking my head in agreement up to the point of stepping up, and I thought adopting, but marrying the husband too, who was widowed?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And then this apparently happened, to take care of the
Yeah.
sister's kids,
Oh,
but
God.
then they had two kids of their own.
Right.
In addition to, and then there was my father, who was part of another branch of the family, and his parents died young, and this aunt and uncle adopted them, so they were like, and the age range was huge.
So
It
you
was like
need a genogram to make sense of all of this.
actually my family. So I have a huge chart of what this is my father's side of the family. I have a chart of my mother's side.
And it gets
So,
even better. Maybe that will be another show because I've recently taped very spontaneously a show with Eric talking about my grandfather murdering a woman. I've probably run that by you before, or I
oh,
guess I maybe I
that's a
didn't.
good one.
Well, yeah, I can bring a quick story in about Charles Hale again from Artists Without Walls, but he had so many great stories about his relatives, and he would research them. And at one point, after seeing a few of his terrific videos, White Wings, and I'm trying to think of a couple of others about his great uncle, who was lieutenant in the fire department in New York. And anyway, finally, I said to him one day, I said, Charles, I have a question. You have these great stories about your family, and you seem to have a lot of genuine enthusiasm for researching them. What if the story's not so good? And he says, well, like what? And he said, like my grandfather murdered a woman, and he got off, and he's like, shit. And he says, oh, the ones that live large in the family, and and that no one wants to talk about. So I kind of uh, I am trying to work up I guess a memoir of sorts. I picture everything. I'm a visual person, so it clearly is a long way away from movies when you give the description of everything that's involved, and what could possibly go wrong with that goal and dream. But nevertheless, it's how I picture the story. And Colin Broderick had been the one to work with me last year around how to tell it, and Martha Pinson, also a movie director, was everything is you got to figure out how to tell it. So that's had me kind of stuck. But Colin's words blew me away when he said you have to tell it through you, and I didn't understand that. Why? I met him once. He says, "Well, he's in your blood. He's your grandfather." So that's just sending a few things. I thought of this when you talked about Screen Door Jesus and all these little stories, that maybe this was very personal to those people, which can be a problem if the story is too personal or you're too close to it. And so I don't know. I put that as a want. The first podcast, I referenced viewers to a TED Talk where the question by Rita Wilson was, "What do you want?" And so I thought, as a good sort of thread through many of these podcasts, it would be nice to ask you not only what do you want now, but has COVID influenced in any way your perspective, and also the answer you might give now for, okay, what do I want right now as a human being? No pressure, and you don't have
Uh,
to answer it.
I mean, I know how I've been feeling the last couple of days, and there's been like outrageous stuff on the news, and
Mhm.
at a time where you wish that everyone had listened to Mario Cuomo. I mean, if the rest
I
of the
listen.
country, well, if it wasn't made into a political point,
Yeah.
the whole country might be where New York is right now. And, having gone through what New York went through, with an older relative and all of that, is horrific and, profoundly horrific, just,
Unprecedented, horrific.
well, yeah, but also, the fear. Forget about being in immediate contact with someone who's, might be asymptomatic or and the threat of getting the disease. But, when I see it in my father's face, just how terrified. I just imagine, talking about something 50 times worse than 9/11. In terms of the toll. It's like incomprehensible, kind of what's going on. I mean, we're expected to now persevere through all of this,
Right.
but it's so complicated, and people take the political interests, and put that, I mean, everyone understands the need to open up the economy,
Yeah.
but now we've got, the newest thing now is the whole thing with the schools,
Right.
and
Oh
opening
my
up the
goodness.
schools. And the thing that I find the most ludicrous is people who don't have kids
Yeah.
are chiming in about how, like parents right now are experiencing this profound dilemma
Yeah.
of having kids at home, juggling work, trying to keep their kids uh,
And my
distracted,
daughter and my
busy,
grandchildren. It's
all of these like insurmountable dilemmas that are facing parents right now.
right.
And they have to listen to people who don't have kids chime
Well,
in,
it's
not to take away the value of their opinion at all.
yeah.
But the COVID experience is totally different. I mean, my daughter's, not living at home, so I'm here with me and my cat, and I can get some work done, and I can binge watch The Sopranos,
Yeah.
and wait until the world opens up again. But there are people that, as bad as it is for me, it's worse for 90% of the other people out there.
Well,
That's the thing that I have to look for every day. That's the positive thing. It's like trying to be grateful and trying to make the most out of, what I have going on right now. A lot of people I talk to are really depressed about
they're very
work, their
depressed. I mean,
health, their relatives.
so where do you kind of go for hope? I think as a therapist, I'm being asked that more often now. I'm probably busier than I've been in a long time. This has I called it a COVID winter instead of a COVID blizzard initially, just to kind of prepare people's mindset around the long season. But now it's going on this long. I've heard predictions of up to 5 years. I hear lots of things, and I'm not projecting that on the show. But um, on one of the shows, I think it was John Moran who brought up Marcus Aurelius's meditations and during the plague that lasted 15 years. And not to be too repetitive on the show, but the reason he brought it up was because there was hope built in there in the knowledge this has happened before. People are not routinely, but periodically exposed to dangers, and it does create fear. How could it not? But how do you keep your head in the game? Is a good question when it goes on this long. Is it easier to be creative? Is it more challenging? I think it's nice that you mentioned and appropriate your appreciation. We're in Maine, and it's not the same. I can't even say I can comprehend what you've seen and gone through and the sights. really what your mind has taken in during all of this. But has it changed your outlook on, okay, is every day more important? Are there things that have taken a back seat that you never thought you could uh, drop on that priority list? Or, you know,
Well, there's always something.
there's always something.
There's
I
always
know that.
something. So, yes, this is an unbelievable challenge and a profound challenge because it's hitting everybody.
Yeah.
And, I mean, the thing that helps me cope is talking to people, even just, this half hour, 40 minutes on Zoom.
Oh,
And sometimes I feel, yeah, and that's why I kind of did the readings the way I did those readings. And,
yep.
we were getting 60, 70 people a week, coming in.
Yeah.
And it was nice seeing everybody's face in the gallery. And, it kind of did bring back a little sense of normalcy. But then I found that when the evenings were over, there'd be an hour where I was like really feeling bad.
Oh,
And I'm not going to say depressed because I'm not. It's not depression, but I was feel like, wow. In the old days, we used to go out for a drink or something after the readings, and here it was just like I had 70 people in my kitchen, and
yeah.
now they're all gone.
They're all gone. What an interesting way to put it. Thank you for mentioning about the technology, and it is one of the reasons I decided to do a podcast. And me and everyone else in the world, I tried getting this microphone for about 2 months because apparently everyone is deciding to take to the screen, and you hit the nail on the head. It's really to substitute the absence of connection. By nature, we are connectors. We are
Right,
not, most of us, loners. Some of us like our alone time, but not to the degree that you're isolated and not seeing other people for real. The virtual hug can only go so far, although I send you one. you know and we have to make do with that for now. I the school piece, I don't know what to think, because as a grandparent, I'm in a next tier away from the decision making, but no less worried about
right, sure,
what this has done to my grandchildren. They're 9, 7, and 4, and they're experiencing it very differently, of course, without some of the trappings that adults have, but also the tolerance you build as you get older. So some of these things are hitting them like head on. Not even seeing a friend, or
right.
birthdays that are just so different. I'm going to do one of the shows with a woman who spent a year and a half planning her wedding, and the process, I guess, of appreciating that this is important to distance and masks, but it's so incongruent with anything that she painstakingly planned for a year and a half. So I look forward to having her on the show. Um, I don't know. So it's changed us,
There,
and
there,
people.
have been, there have been Zoom funerals.
I
You know, I
attended.
it
Yeah,
was I did too. It was heartbreaking. You know, you
heartbreaking,
you
heartbreaking.
see the relatives, um, 4 or 5 of them at the gravesite,
Yeah.
and you know that if this was normal times, there might have been 100 people there, and it's
It was better than nothing, but it again, people ask what the new normal is going to be, and I think I go back to my show, You Know What You Know, where one of the biggest realizations was how important it is to say I don't know when you really don't know, and not make something up, and just be one with people's confusion, fear, uncertainty. But you have added to our day today, Sam, I must say, and very grateful even for our chat the other day, helping to fix the sound. You reached out to me, and I just thought that was really sweet, because I'd been open about the or vulnerable and open about my lack of knowledge and asking people to hang in there. So I appreciate
Well,
you coming on.
every Zoom group that I've been a part of, and I've been part of, a dozen or so in the last year, everybody's figuring this out. People beforehand, or what settings to use, and
Yeah.
you know how to navigate it. So, and the ones that are polished are the ones that I wouldn't want to go in that direction anyway.
Phew.
Um, so there's
I'm
some theater.
relieved.
Well, there's some theater groups that bought like the advanced Zoom program,
Yeah.
the webinar thing that
Yeah.
runs, but then you don't get any sense of the other people that are there watching the performance. It's just you in your living room, and there's no technical snafus, but you wonder who else is in the theater that night.
Right.
Uh,
And I wouldn't want to rob or deny viewers of outtakes, things that didn't go well. Anyway, this went really well for me anyway. I enjoyed it. And so
all right, good.
we're going to post any, if you have any links or photos or anything. One thing my daughter used to do as an illustrator is paint movie posters, in the old style. And she's really a very talented artist illustrator. But those were a particular, I guess I would say, niche for her because she is a movie lover. She writes very well, but the posters, it's visual communication. So if you have anything you want to send to us, and we'll get
I wish I
edit.
could I wish I could swivel this around and show you my Klaus Kinski Fitzgeraldo poster on the other wall here.
Well, take a photo of it, send it
I'll take
to
a photo.
Eric. He's great if it's got reflection, whatever, he can touch it up. But we'll put that on the show. How's that sound?
Okay, that's
Oh,
great. That's
well, thanks again, Sam, and I hope to check back with you soon, and maybe it'll be under better circumstances. And the best would be getting to New York or having you come to Maine. So we'll see how that might work at some point. All right.
I'll be here until further notice.
Okay. Thanks, Sam. Have a great day.